here we go. We've been bringing it. I know you don't know this because you're not a fishing guy, which is sometimes good for our relationship and sometimes not. But we have another unicorn. I don't know how I'm doing this. I'm not going to tell people how I'm doing this, but we've had the likes of Gary Roach and Al Linder, which are unicorns, not only because they're the big time at what they've done for a million years, but they don't do podcasts. They don't even know what a podcast is, right? Like, that's not their deal. Well, I've got another one of those, and you might have to search this guy out. But anybody that's fished has known this guy. He has developed so many lures and rods and reels, TV shows, you name it. We have Larry Dahlberg on the show.
Yeah, so I did, when you told me we had Larry, I did look him up, and just legendary career, right? I mean, the amount of lures and things he's developed, his TV show, he's a science guy, right? He takes a science approach to everything. And, I think that's led to probably the success of his lures.
I'll go on a limb and say Larry's one of the best fishermen that there is to do it. And it's mainly because he doesn't just catch fish or put himself in the right circumstance, which is obviously what a great fisherman does. But I think he understands why it happened and when it's going to happen. And because of what you just said, and he's really involved with the start to finish, where I think a lot of guys just want that instant gratification, right? Catch them. Hey, why'd you catch him there? Whatever, I caught him. Does it matter? And Larry would probably almost get if you watch his stuff, more angry because he doesn't know why he caught him, even though he already caught him. Like, how do you even get mad at that? But that's kind of my take. So I'm interested to hear some of his stuff. I know he did some stuff with Fisherman for quite a number of years. And it's just funny, so many of these legendary guys, how connected they are with people that nowadays we don't realize that they were connected with, that they started with back in the day, and how paths may have went differently, but yet the correlation there. So we're not going to tell you how we got Larry Dahlberg on the show, but I can promise you he's going to bring it. He doesn't know how not to.
All right, real quick, tell everybody what to do, where to find you. Let's give you the quiz here.
Yeah, I can see if I pass my own test again. Bigwaterfishing.com. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. And, of course, we are on YouTube, just like you could watch right here with the videos with our podcast series, our cooking stuff, our informational videos, all that good stuff. But our podcast is also available on digital downloads, Spotify, Google, Apple. Help me.
One more.
Stitcher. Man,
yeah.
I feel like I almost passed that one. Well, let's get to Larry, because I've been waiting for this one, to be honest with you, because like I said, of all people that just they don't do these things, kind of like the Al Linder thing. Larry is not a guy that is super involved with getting around people, and that's what makes it so awesome. So I can't wait to dig into this one. Let's do it. Larry, welcome to the Bigwater podcast. We've had a little technical difficulties here, but we are happy to have you. I can personally say that I have watched The Hunt for Big Fish and a bunch of other things through the years, and I'm really glad to have some time and steal a little bit of your knowledge, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm up. I'm ready to roll.
So how did we even get here? I mean, I know my journey to make a fishing, living for 20 plus years so far, believe it or not, has been a windy road and up and down. And I'm sure you're very similar. I mean, how do you get to that point? I mean, obviously you love to fish, but at what point did you quit a job, or did you kind of fish bum out of the beginning, or how'd this start up?
Charlie died. Is it all? There was a private fishing camp consisting of a bunch of wealthy industrialist type dudes that started in the lower Mississippi River. And that when the Mississippi got messed up by the Army Corps, they moved north to this area. And it was guys like Mr. Pillsbury that started the Pillsbury Company, the Daniels family ADM company, vice president of head of international for General Electric, guys like that. Anyway, they had a private club, and there was a bunch of guys that 2, 3, 4 local guys that did the guiding, older people, and one of them died. And Pillsbury was coming. It was emergency help. We need a guide. They called my dad. He said, take the kid. He knows where the bass are. And I got my first tryout. I think I was 11. And after fishing with him for a day, I got a full-time job. So that's how I got into it.
That,
You know,
you've been doing this a while then.
well, what it was, my old man used to, when I was a little kid, they let people run free. You'd let your dogs run free. You let kids run free. Little town, 900 people. And at age, 5 and 6, I was down at the little reservoir in town all by myself, winging a daredevil with 54-pound line on it. As I got older, age 9, 10, my old man had dumped me in the river and picked me up 3 days later. And I got to just, be like a wild child. And I'd climb trees and look down in the water. They didn't have polarized glasses then, so you had to get up in the air to see what's going on. And I'd catch frogs and crayfish and crap and bring them up, throw them down in the water and watch the fish come out and eat them. So when I'm guiding some fly fishermen, I know there's a red rock over there and there's a 3-pounder right upstream from it. You can't see it from here, but if you climb that tree. And the other guides were much older than me, but they fished walleyes mostly. They only guided when they were with the fly fishermen who fished topwater. So they didn't, they knew the good banks, but they didn't know, like yesterday, there was a 4-pounder right there. And so anyway, this fellow thought I was a savant because every time I said there's one there, there was. And then I got a full-time job, that's all. And it's just a matter of time on the water with your eyes open. Nothing's
yeah, I mean,
changed, ever. It never will.
But, there's a big difference. There's a lot of young kids even now that like to fish, right? And then that weans a little bit. Guys get into girls and stuff. As you get into high school, things change in sports or what have you. I mean, this continued on in high school, obviously. Were you still doing the guiding thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a great gig. Other than that, around here, you want to make extra money, you had a paper out, or you go pick cucumbers or do something, mow lawns. Guiding, where I was making $14 a day and doing what I loved to do when I was 11, 12 years old. And so I did that all through high school and college and so on. And we lived had a cabin on a lake. And I got a depth finder really early in life when it first came out. And so I was sort of a combination of river fisherman, lake fisherman, fly rod, spoon plugs, wire line. I was, born in that time when we had a revolution in angling, where we had learned about topography. Buck Perry had, evangelized, and so it was kind of the Renaissance period, I think, in modern angling, and I was lucky enough to be at the right age at the right time for that. But anyway, yeah, I love to fish, and I got a job guiding. And the only people I ever guided were fly fishermen. My dad wouldn't let me take other people. He said they'll come back without you. The fly guys, you don't need to worry about them.
That's probably true. That's probably true to this day.
Yeah. And walleyes, I always looked at them as a punishment because my mom wouldn't let my dad and I really focus on muskies until we filled the freezer with walleyes. And all through life, I fish, I like to eat walleyes. And I know that's what most of your podcast is about. But they're an interesting animal. And we talked earlier. I was on the scene when the 22-pound 11-ouncer was caught at Greer's Ferry. I drove down there with a couple of buddies of mine. Billy Linder. Do you know Bill Linder?
I do.
Yeah. Willie was with us. That was when he was really, really young. And it was a good friend of mine, Frankie Dusenka from Frankie's Live Bait in Marine up here. He's the largest Ranger dealer now. Back then, it was just, we were just kids.
He went from minnows to boats. That's probably a good move.
It was a good move. But anyway, we drove down there to Greer's Ferry, and because there was some event, I forget what was going on, but I'd heard about these big walleyes, and so we went down there. I sniffed around a little bit, and well, first I got to tell you, it was a crazy experience. We go out. We don't know Frankie and I don't know Billy Linder from Adam, and Willie back then. He's always been really funny. He's always goofy. Back then he was super goofy, and he had all this curly goofy hair, and so did Frankie. He's bald now, but anyway, he had one of those guys that curled their hair back then. I wasn't one of them, but anyway, both these guys are like that. And we've got a motor home And we drive down there, and we're parked by a big giant rock that's bigger than the motorhome. We've got a map, and this is pre, GPS or any of that. And Greer's Ferry is a great big body of water. And we get down there, it's nighttime. We go out in the middle of the night. It's dark. We go out and we're in the middle, but we don't know where the hell we're going. And we wind up in the back end of this little dead end creek arm. And Billy Linder is running the boat. And Frankie and I were thinking, he knows what he's doing, but we're starting to go around in these real tight circles. And we're trying to fish, and it's like, what's going on? And and we're looking at each other. Well, he's, Billy Linder, he must know what he's doing, maybe. And it's a real tight little area. And we realize Willie's asleep. He's standing up on the trolling motor pedal, and he's fast asleep. That's just Willie. You get to know him. So anyway, we decide we better go home, and we get out of there, and we realize we don't know really where we are, but there's a radio tower that we had used as a reference. It's way up, way down. And so now Frankie's driving, and I didn't know him that well really then, and I'm riding beside him, and we're kind of going slow in this bass boat. And all of a sudden there's some trees around, and oh crap, we're out of the channel, and we're going along. And all of a sudden, the boat goes up on end like this. It tips. Frankie's driven up into the crotch of a tree. And I turned back, and Willie has fallen off the back seat and landed on the back of the motor. They were both asleep. Frankie's driving. I find he had narcolepsy. Found out that later. And we finally, get back to where we had parked. And I'm looking at this map. There's 3 rivers that came in there. And I figured, the hell with this. We rented a little boat, and we brought a little motor with us, like a 15 horse. And I'd been sniffing around the mouths of these rivers. I knew that's where these walleyes were. So we get this little boat, we're cruising around out there, and there's a delta off the river mouth with some stumps and stuff on it. And we bump into this guy in a kayak. He's got a green kayak with a beer cooler in front of him. He's got a depth finder on it, a trolling motor on it, and he's dragging it's like a bomber that ran maybe 12, 14 feet, like a long A with a lip on it. And the guy was sharp. He ends up catching a 22-pound, 11-ounce walleye. Big.
So that was Al Nelson.
Al Nelson, yeah, from the Red Rooster Cafe in Heber Springs. Great guy. And I got a bunch of really good photos of it. And touched it and sniffed it. It was about 37 inches long. It was just huge, fat fish.
So correct me where I'm wrong here, because I don't know the whole story, but there was a tournament going on.
Yeah, it was kind of like a tournament. What it was, the Fairfield Bay, there's a bunch of really wealthy people that had bought all this really inexpensive, hillbilly land, you might call it. And they wanted to promote it. And so if you broke the state record, it was like a $25,000 reward or prize. And if you broke the world record, it was twice that. So it was a really big deal for people, which leads me to the rest of the story. So anyway, I see what the deal is. And I know where these fish are. I look at the maps, and there's topographic maps that give you elevations. So what we did, we got this little boat, and I grew up running rivers, and we start tearing up this river. I forgot which of the arms it was. I could look at a map. I think it was the middle one, but I don't remember. So long ago. And we'd run up and come to a rapids, and I'd dump out the other 2 guys, and I'd run the boat up through the rapids. They'd get in. We'd run up, go up, kept going till we got to this is it. They cannot get upstream further. This is where the walleyes will spawn. The substrate was right. Everything was right. High noon, clear blue skies. Frankie throws out a tinsel tail jig, a flash of boob tail jig, hops it 2 or 3 times, boom, catches a 12-pounder. We catch another one, like 6 pounds, 8 pounds. I mean, it's noon and gin clear water, and
great timing.
And I said, okay, man, we'll just sit here till the sun goes down, and it's going to happen. It was a perfect setup. It's rapids with a flat above it, 8-10 feet of water, bunch of big boulders, and it ran up to a rapids that there's no way they're going to get up. It's got rocks, pea size on up through the whole spectrum with some boulders in it. Perfect place for walleyes to spawn. So we're sitting there, and it's getting darker and darker, and then we see some lanterns coming through the woods. And we're wondering, what the heck? And these people come, and they got pitchforks and great big hoop nets, lanterns, and shotguns. And they said, hey, y'all, this is our spot. You ought to get out of here. And we're pretending to be invisible. The river's like about 150 feet wide. And what it was, they were there to do some poking around. They'd go up and poke in the shallows, and walleyes, and they'd scoop them up in these nets. And for them, if you had that big fish, you'd be a way out of there. And well, anyway, we got out of there. And
is that what you were doing down there? Is you were trying to get that world record for this kind of competition or whatever you want to call it?
Oh, not at all. I just down there heard there's big walleyes down there, so I wanted to go see if they were really down there. That's all. I've never been too interested in competitions and tournaments. If I'm looking for a fish, I would go not at a time when there's a million people around, or at a time that someone else had planned. I would go at a time that it was my time, that I would decide this will be the best time to go. And for walleyes, of course, springtime and fall, any of those transition times for any of the fish that live at our latitude. You get a little bit further south, where fish are not affected by the latitudes, hot and cold. They're affected by high water and low water, and it's a whole different systemic kind of a deal. But the reason I was there was I was looking for, see if there's a big walleye. There's a strain down there called a Big River strain, Great River strain. And I know of fish of that species up to 42 inches long that have been caught. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can correct it, because I've never talked to anybody that was actually there for that. Just that Al Nelson had that little sneak boat, like you said, like a glorified kayak at the time.
It was a duck boat. Purely a duck boat with a trolling motor on it. It was brilliant. He had a good outfit, man.
But there was supposedly more certified 20-pound plus walleyes caught during that than the rest of history put together, because they hit that spawn just right or what have you.
That's true.
That's crazy.
But I mean, it wasn't one year. It was every year for 2, 3, 4 years until they cranked them out of there. And I'm sure they're still there. There's still a bunch of big ones there. If you're going to catch big ones, you don't catch them on leeches. You got to focus on a big walleye. The standard techniques that we use to catch a stringer of walleyes are not designed to catch big ones.
Yeah. Big old stick baits, huh?
I didn't say that.
No? What is it? What's the inside tip? Give us the inside tip on this. We like big walleyes.
Well, you got to fish with what they eat. And, I mean, look at a walleye, how he's rigged up. Just think about it. He hasn't got sandpaper teeth like a bass. He hasn't got really teeth on the roof of his mouth like a pike or a muskie. He's got these really great little grasping seizing teeth. He's got a sneak factor built in with a eyeball system that's got some advantages. And what he's going to do, a big walleye like where I live, Minnesota, Wisconsin, unscrewed up water in terms of being polluted and et cetera, et cetera. Our primary forage bases are suckers. And a big walleye meaning a fish in the 32, 34 inch range, even 28 to 30 inch range. They like to eat sucker minnows that are about as big around as bigger than a hot dog. And they focus on those much more than they do on smaller forage. And I think that most walleye anglers, use stuff that's too small. Also, they can be really selective. It's really interesting. I don't know how to exactly say it. Well, I've got fish that I know exactly where they are. And I had a friend who was a pretty good walleye angler, in fact, a guide. And he was telling me that how tough things were. And I said, well, they're tough. The fish are right where you're fishing them. I'll show you. And he was a kind of anti-live bait guy. Didn't think you needed to use live bait. And so he used mostly jigs. And he was a good jig fisherman, soft plastics on. And so what I did, I brought live sucker minnows that I had bought from a bait store that had been raised in a pond. I had maybe a dozen. And then I had another dozen that I had caught myself that were exactly the same size that were in a natural system. We parked on these fish, let him flip his lures out until he said they're not here. I then took the farm-raised sucker minnow with a small split shot on it, pitched it, really light line, ran it through, not an indication. A couple more shots, and exactly, I'm talking about within a square foot in the presentation of this thing, nothing. And then I put on one, exactly the same everything, that was caught in a real system. Flip it out, and you feel the minnow as he gets near where Mr. Walleye is. You feel him go, jumping, dug, 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 and then whoomp, whoomp. I repeated it 6 times back to back. He became a believer. I have seen exactly the same thing happen with more species than I can name, from things that you may have heard of to species that are familiar. And it's when they're tough, they can be tough. And oftentimes it is the reaction of what it is that they're thinking about eating that makes them bite it. And if it doesn't react at the right place and the right time, and the fish is not charged up, it may not get eaten.
So what do you think was the difference between the pond-reared ones?
Reaction. I fished with pond-reared suckers for muskies in nice clear water environments where I've seen a muskie swim up and look at the sucker and say, hey, you know what? And the sucker goes, hey, pal, what's up? And the muskie will go bonk, bonk, and bump him. And if I go give the sucker a pull, he gets nailed. But if he doesn't react at the right time, oftentimes the predator doesn't eat him because they're not all charged up. So it's a question of reacting at the right time. Doug Hannon called it random non-mechanical action when it came to working a lure. In other words, how many times have you been trolling along and you've been going along for a half a mile and then you go snap, snap, and all of a sudden, boom, you got bit. That happens a lot, doesn't it? Where you're going along and all of a sudden, you made bottom contact, and you get bit. Go fish lake trout up in any body of water. Pick whatever one you want where there's a lot of lakers and it's clear. Put on a spoon of some kind, jack it up, run it behind your boat, stand up and watch it. Troll in the shallows where there's a lot of juveniles. And you might find there's all of a sudden you got 6 fish following your spoons. All of a sudden there's 8 or 10. They're just following it, and you might feel a little tap now and then. Now give one of them a hard rip. Boom. It gets bit. They might follow it for half a mile before they react to it. Just what it is. Don't ask me why. It's the
yeah. And back here, 100% agree with you. And it doesn't matter if you're pumping a spinner bait or whatever. But like on Lake Erie, on Lake Erie, roughly 20 some years ago, when Scott Stecker came up with a reef runner. Not that he invented the curved bait, but kind of as far as in the deep diving, walleye world, right? That kind of lazy Ike look. And that bait, they're a pain in the butt to keep tuned, and a lot of guys don't like them, but they hunt. And just what you said, they'll just kick out left to right, especially with the current we have. We have a lot of pocket current. They'll kick left and right out of nowhere. You almost think the bait's out of tune. And I really feel that that's one of the biggest attributes of those baits and why.
Well, of course, absolutely. You remember a Brooks reefer?
Now we're getting almost past my age bracket, but I know what you're talking about, believe it or not.
And there's another one that was used up in Lake Winnebago called a sparkle tail. Same family of baits, that it was actually better designs than the one you're mentioning, but same concept exactly. It's older than the hills. It's just people, don't know. Yeah,
reinvented it a little bit.
Well, they don't get defined accurately enough to begin with. Usually people say, oh, wow, they bit it because it was this color or this or that. to me, it's more important what they do in the water when you move them than what they look like when you're fishing something that's not static, you know.
So let's talk about lure development a little bit, because again, I can remember, I don't know you, but I can remember following your stuff and seeing, didn't you have like a rod test chart on like your back wall at your house or your shop or something?
Yeah, what happened actually, when I was in my mid-teens, we had some guys from the 3M company that were members of the president of 3M and the head of new business ventures and product development were members of our club. And they bought they bought Scientific Anglers Fly Line Company, and they bought a company called Carbonite that were doing research and development on going into the application of fishing rods. And they sent an engineer named Cecil Jacobs. He's the guy that brought graphite technology from England to the U.S. He was an Air Force guy, engineer. Then after he got out of the stint in the Air Force, 3M hired him for advanced composite stuff. And so he hired me to take him fishing. He wanted to photograph casting, fishing, fly casting, regular, blah, blah. And studying the, how do you put it, the mechanics of a flexible lever as it applies to angling. And so what he did, he taught me a really lot about how the way a rod bends, the curvature of a bend, or the materials it's made out of, so on and so on, how that affects both recovery, how it affects casting, how it affects your ability to land a fish, all that kind of crap. Very, very interesting. So, yeah, I always, when I'm trying to develop something or a blank, I want to find out what it, compare it to another one that I have used in the past. Then you have to have a frame of reference, and that's about the only way there is to do that accurately.
And it's funny because talking about coming full circle, I know you did a lot with Shimano through the years, and now I work with Shimano and G. Loomis and work with developing rods, and that's what we're doing right now with some new series. And like I said, it's most people don't realize that stuff, but you've been doing that an awful long time.
Yeah, gosh, for 50, 65, 60 years.
It's a long time. That's a long time to do anything. But lures, I mean, the rods, I mean, I know you're into that, and that just shows like how kind of crazy you are with, you just don't half-ass do anything. But
I need to understand.
Yeah, that helps out. Helps you do better, right?
Well, when somebody says, why don't I fall off the earth? I say, well, because of gravity. Bullshit. You don't know either. I need to understand, how does this work?
As somebody that watches your stuff and doesn't know you or not one of your fishing buddies, they see what you're doing, and they see like the Mr. Wiggly to me was the first thing where people that didn't know Larry Dahlberg or the Hunt for Big Fish saw that and realized, hey, you're a tackle tinker. I know, I'm sure you were doing it well before that, obviously, but is that really the big thing that kind of catapulted you being known for a tackle tinker?
I'm not sure. I think, no. What happened, the first stuff I ever did on messing with lures was within fishermen. I used to drive, Don Persh, he used to run Nielsen's up on Rowan Lake. He's a muskie guy. And I'd always bring a drill and a bunch of drill bits, lead, and I'd be drilling holes in suics while we were fishing in the boat. It'd drive him nuts because I was drilling holes in lures, not casting. But I actually, I've messed with lures since I was really little. My dad built lures and musky bucktails and stuff like that. And we were pouring lead in molds when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, homemade molds and so on. But one of the early Hunt for Big, not early, maybe 3, 4, 5 years into the show on the Hunt for Big Fish, I had been sometimes having to pull lures out of the box that I made myself to, catch what I needed to catch. And one of the shows, I think I showed how to make something. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a variation of a sliding spoon, actually, that we use for tarpon. Tarpon, you hook them, they come up, shake their head, jump, and get off all the time. So I was using a sliding deal. So when they get hooked, they shake their head, the actual weight and the spoon goes sliding up the leader, and they just don't get off. And I showed how to do that on TV, and the producers, or the whatever those things are called at ESPN, the people that look at the shows, and tell you whether they're good or not. I didn't like that at all. But when I ran it, I got more responses from the audience than I would get if I caught a 1,000-pound marlin. And I had a hunch that a lot of people that are interested in what I was doing are equally interested in, messing with lures. And so that's really where it started. And then we started a little adjunct to the show called Larry's Workshop, where we'd show people actually how to build stuff.
Yeah, and that's I think what I saw was and so for people that haven't seen this stuff, like Mr. Wiggly's basically like I don't know how you want to describe it. It's a giant soft plastic, right?
Yeah, what it is, actually, there was a friend of mine who lived down in Florida who's really a good dude that invented something called a banjo minnow. And he got hooked up with some people that were, kind of took advantage, but it was a really, really effective lure. But when you get to beyond, and it was hooked, you remember it probably, it's got a little screw in the nose. You get it tuned right, you get the right hook, you snap that thing, and we're talking random mechanical action. Well, that's it, and that's it. But when you get them any longer than about this big, the hook so far forward, even with a large predator, you end up with a lot of no hookups. So what Mr. Wiggly is a banjo minnow on steroids. The banjo minnow didn't have any keel or any way to keep it really as stable. It was made more of a twitch. And what I wanted with Wiggly is something I could do that, but also something I could burn really fast that would track straight. And so the predecessor of Mr. Wiggly is just a banjo minnow on steroids with some sort of obedience training thrown in.
So, I mean, probably a lot of people don't realize that you are the guy behind the Whopper Plopper. That's been a pretty good deal, right? I mean, that almost is.
People are catching a lot of fish on Whopper Ploppers. There's a website called Whopper Plopper Nation. And I just love to look at it every morning. All these people that are plopping whoppers with their Whopper Ploppers.
So how did that thing come about? Because I see a lot of kind of musky style lure thing, and that's, and now it's available as a topwater for smallmouth or smaller.
When I was a little kid, my dad started taking me. It was like, okay, I wanted to go musky fishing so badly, and he wouldn't take me because I was a little kid, and casting a musky bait's dangerous. So he made a deal: if you stand here in the backyard, cast under the swing set into the box, 8 out of 10 times you can come along. And I had to cast perfectly overhand, not like this sideways. Well, the summer I was 6, I could do it, and my mom said, "Okay, you got to take him," and that's when I learned to row. Actually. He would sit me on the seat, pulling the left oar, pulling the right oar. And anyway, I couldn't. You had to use a topwater lure because, a little kid, get a backlash reeling in too slow, you're always hung up. Finally, I don't know, I'm about 9 years old, and I'm using this lure called a mud puppy. It was made by in Mosinee, Wisconsin, and a good little bait. And I caught a muskie on it. The tails would break. And it was made out of wood with a little metal thing. And I wrote to the company, I just wanted to get the tails, and they didn't write back. So I repaired the tails, and I noticed that if I would bend the tail differently, if I would bend it at a 90-degree angle, double 90, and then pull it out further before I re-glued it, that it would make more of a pop sound, and I caught more fish on it. Well, 15, 20 years or 30 years goes by, and I'm fishing with a young friend named Josh Stevenson, who is a guide, really excellent angler. Has a shop in Minneapolis or St. Paul called Blue Ribbon Tackle. And he liked that. And since the mud puppy, there have been many, many tail prop style baits. And his favorite, I forgot what it was. I told him, I've got an idea for one. I've got this new material. It's a rubber. And I've always wanted to make a really loud mud puppy style bait. And I'll try to make one. And so I made a couple the first proto wasn't good. The second one worked just exactly perfectly. The tail was maybe 6 times larger volume. And Josh and I got together on the opening of a muskie and went to this little lake that he likes to fish. And I think he caught like 3 or 4 of them on it. They just were eating it up. And throughout the next month, he caught another 30 or something, guiding. And then I showed people how to make them on a TV, make lure thing. And then we decided at River to Sea wanted to build a version of it. So, we did, and that's where that came from.
That one has still been going. The test of time is always the true deal. In the tackle world, stuff that just flames out quickly.
Yeah, the first one we made was 190, a pretty good sized one, and then went to a 130 and started making smaller sized ones. And I guess the real flattery is, it's funny, Berkeley won a prize for the product of the year with a copy of the Whopper Block Berkeley, which I think is really flattering. But anyway.
Well, the awards things, I'm kind of like you with some of that stuff. I don't really get into it too much because I think you can get too overhyped, or like the one year at ICAST where a bucket won Best New Showcase. And I was like, it's a bucket.
Yeah, I always, when it comes to fishing lures, I always let the fish decide. Yeah, the humans will bite on anything.
Well, that's always the first one you got to sell, that's for sure. But the second one's pretty darn important for the longevity.
Yeah.
So lure stuff, do you have anything else in the works? Are you going to kick out one more? Are you still tweaking that stuff, or has that been sidelined?
Oh, I'm messing with that stuff all the time. I'm not into the lure business to sell lure. Never have been. The first thing I ever developed was something, it's called Flashaboo now. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
And then I've got a diver fly that I just made him to catch fish. And then, people find out about them and they catch on. But mostly I just do it for my own purposes. So I don't have any, I got a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't show people. I only fish with 2 people. So
you're out of, let's say, high school, college age, you're still doing the guiding thing. At that point, even back then, I mean, I look at it now, it's much easier to make a living. I would think I could say making a living fishing now because it's more accepted, aside from just straight guiding. So back up however many years, is that where, dad or mom or somebody goes, okay, you're about ready to get out of the nest here. What are you going to do? Or were they supportive of the fishing thing? Like, how's that transition? When a kid's 16, 17, 18, 19, liking to fish and making a living is a whole different gig.
Well, actually, I got out of high school and I graduated in 1968. And the guys that I had guided had my life planned out for me. They wanted me to I turned down a whole bunch of football scholarships at a bunch of major schools and so on. And I wasn't interested in playing sports in college. So I went to a small school and the people I was guiding said, major in English, minor in poli-sci, and then we're going to pay your way to the William Mitchell School of Law and make you a U.S. Senator. Me? And then Vietnam came, and I lost my best friend in Vietnam. And I decided I wasn't going to necessarily go on with the path that I had thought I was going to go on with. And I wound up with a major in creative writing, a minor in poli-sci. And the guys at 3M, who I'd mentioned earlier, who I was guiding, wanted me to go to work for them in the fly fishing side, the scientific anglers deal. But there was a hiring freeze on. Jimmy Carter was president. And so they suggested, hey, you should go get some retail experience. Now, there was a store opening called Burger Brothers Sporting Goods. Like later was purchased, I think, by Holiday, then Gander Mountain. And anyway, I went to work there for several months, and or a few years, actually, and published a newspaper for them, actually, and developed their business. And then from there went on to develop a manufacturer's rep business. And then how'd I get into this, the media side? I got a call from Spence Petros. You remember him? He was a writer for Fishing Facts. And he was up in somewhere. northern Wisconsin with Roland Martin, and they were trying to do some television shows. And he called me and wanted to, called me out of the blue. I don't know where he got my name even. And wanted to know if I knew where there was a fish they could catch. I said, yeah. And so I took him and Roland fishing. And we caught 3 muskies, like bing, 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 had a double actually. And the first one I predicted, I told the camp, it was really funny. We went to this area. It's going to be right there. Get set up. Tell Spencer, Roland, let's go right here. I might catch one right here. Nah, we kind of like it over here. So I told Eddie, the cameraman, I'm going to catch a muskie right there. Really? Yeah. And he hadn't had his camera out for 2 weeks. And he had this big cooler. It said FRED on the cooler, which meant effing ridiculous electronic device. It was an early video camera. And he says, really? And I hooked up a bait. It was called a refog. We just developed it, man. Tom Fideli and I were involved with it. And I was selling it as a rep for it. And anyway, I made a cast, and Eddie was rolling. I worked this thing 3 times, and a muskie about 45 inches long ate it. I caught him. And these guys came over there, and so they tied up to me, and I gave them a couple refogs, and they didn't want to use them. And we fooled around there for about 5 minutes, and Petro says, let's get out of here. There's not. And I made one more cast, and I saw a fish coming behind it. I actually jerked the bait out of the water. I said, cast right there. There's a muskie there. I just took the bait away from it. And Petro says, you wouldn't do that. And they made a bunch of more casts. I'm sorry, Spencer, if you're listening to this, but you know it's the truth. And I made a cast, and I stroke, and clunk. I hooked another one right in front of the boat, and I saw a flash by it, and I hollered, cast to my fish, cast, cast, cast. And Roland by this time had caught on quickly, and he had put on the fluorescent green small refog I had given him, and he made a cast, and boing, he hooked up, and we had 2 on at the same time. And his was about a 34-inch. I got off of the boat, and the one I had was maybe high 30s, low 40s. Put it in the tank, and they had enough footage, and then they went home. And that was the first TV stuff I ever did. And then after that, Al Linder gave me a call. And I got together and we did some work together and worked out a deal where I would write a thing for each issue of the magazine and then do a piece in each of their TV shows having to do with fly fishing for oddball or not oddball, but non-trout species. And that's how I got first hooked up with them, and then later on wound up working full-time and producing the TV show and stuff. And then
How long were you with In Fisherman?
She's 5 or 6 years, I guess, 4, 5, 6 years throughout the mid 80s till the 90, 91. And then I went out to decided I wanted to see the rest of the world, and started the hunt for big fish. That took me to 89 countries, 23 years.
Wow. So the hunt for big fish, I think that's where a lot of the generation, or maybe just guys that aren't that are old enough to, that's where we know you from. Maybe it's not the Dahlberg diver or Flashaboo or something like that, right? That's the simplest way because it was so mainstream. Mm-hmm. But looking back on those, were those the best days of your fishing career, being able to travel all over and literally hunt for the big fish, pun intended?
Nothing's changed. I can do it now, but I don't need to drag a cameraman with me.
Cameramen are a pain in the butt, right, producer dude?
Well, I never had a producer. I would only take one cameraman because I did all the editing. I had to edit it. I had to work. I wasn't running the machinery, but it's okay. Tape 14, time code number 1471, and so I logged all the tapes and did all that, and then produced a lot of stuff in Fisherman. So all I wanted was I had maybe 10, 11 different camera guys I would bring along. Different people, just one guy. It's easier to catch 2 fish with one guy than it is 1 fish with 2 guys because they don't pay attention. You get 2 guys. Every person you add to your contingent costs you 5 to 10 minutes at breakfast.
There you go. It's a different way of looking at it, but I definitely see where you're going with that. So, of all of those 89 countries, I mean, where are the ones that if you could only spend a few? I mean, where are you going back? I mean, where are the ones that are just the most memorable?
Well, memorable and going back are two different things. I've been at 3 military revolutions that were rather unsettling, but a place I like to return to is Trinidad. I really like tarpon. Tarpon are they'll change you forever. And I've chased them on the west coast of Africa. I've chased them in so many places. There are tarpon that are almost 400 pounds. I've got video of a 385. But anyway, tarpon, I really like those. And there's some really giant ones in the area around Trinidad. And there's nobody bothering them too much. I've got a friend down there named Jonathan Della Rosa that fishes tarpon down there in a totally different environment than anything that you would imagine or have seen normally. It's deeper water. There's a big river called the Orinoco River. It's 250 miles wide at the mouth, and it's full of little islands and so on, and there's a tide there, 15-foot tide, and it's a tarpon hatchery of biblical proportions. And when those fish blow out of there, if you look at the way Trinidad is set up, there's a little point that comes off of Venezuela, and then you've got the island of Trinidad. There's a pass there, and anyway, there's a whole bunch of tarpon there, and it's a real easy, interesting fishing them. You can fish them with vertical jigs. You can fish them with. We catch the biggest ones on ribbon fish that are probably 30 inches long. It's really.
So how did you select? I mean, you got to keep in mind nowadays, Google and all this stuff, it's a lot easier.
Through that, nah.
I mean, how did you select these sites?
It's easy. You look at a map. Where are not a lot of human beings? Where have I got a great big artery that's rich and full of food and stuff? And then you just go from there. You can't believe, most people don't know crap what they're talking about. You look, there's absolutely no way that I mean, because they don't know what they're looking for. You get a travel agent or you get somebody, a guy, great example. I was sniffing around for tarpon. And I went to, it led me to Nicaragua. There's a lake there. It's the second largest lagoon on planet Earth, the Pearl Lagoon. I spent 30 days looking everywhere. I found these things, and I found out, but it's horrible. I lost so much weight. I got real sick, bunch of stuff. So I find out there's a Frenchman that's got a real nice little place on an island. And he's had a whole bunch of people down there that are outdoor writers and so on that are supposed to be tarpon experts, so on. And they told me he didn't have a tarpon fishery. And it just, you just got to know what you got to, what to look for. And you got to have most people don't even, I travel with the highest quality depth finder that I can buy. I would travel with it, turn it into a portable. You get somewhere, you're fishing out of a hollow log. Do you think the native knows anything? No, you hook up your 350A and just start breaking it down. And that's the deal. That's what you do. The natives, everybody talks about local knowledge and native booga. That's a bunch of baloney.
Yeah, you're right. Like you said, the guy's fishing out of a hollow log. He may tell you where your one thing's going to happen, but probably not intricacy.
He knows where they were yesterday, and he's got a big excuse as to why they weren't there today if there's pressure on him. And they know how to get home. That's the most important thing. But you cannot rely on those guys because they it's like the difference. They
want to eat them.
Yeah, it's just different. It's like before we had depth finders, you cast to the left of the stump. But, part of the fun deal is going someplace and rubbing the silver off the lottery card. And you just take it bit by bit. It can be really difficult because you're, tough equipment, tough times. Food might be pretty tough. But it's always I've had some really interesting experiences, that's for sure.
So you mentioned that you were in the middle of 3 wars there. Explain that a little bit. There had to be some shenanigans going on there.
Well, one of them we were in, there's a little country called Sao Tome Principe. It's off the coast of West Africa. I was fishing. I didn't know much about blue marlin, but I was really lucky. We caught like a whole bunch of them, like 18 of them, I think over 600 pounds. And we were just leaving. And there was nobody there at the airport except an armed guard. And he explained that the country had been overthrown. And they didn't get it sorted out for 3 or 4 days. What had happened, the president hadn't paid the couple of guards, a couple of military people, like $14 is what he owed them per month. And so they took over the country. And
Jesus.
it was pretty funny. And then we had one, it was just a riot kind of in Venezuela, where they were tipping cars over and lighting them on fire. I forgot what happened. They were pissed off about something. And wanted a whole bunch of money to leave the country, and we just used the TV camera and get your name and badge. And then another one was in the Soviet Union in the early 90s. It was a bunch of crazy stuff, and almost got stuck there like for 2 or 3 months. Got followed by the KGB to Kazakhstan. They followed us. It was funny. I'd be out fishing. They'd be going through my junk, going through my gear.
Yeah, that changes things a little bit. Well, because you're such a thinker, and since I've got your undivided attention, I look at I live on Lake Erie. I've guided here for 20 some years. I've had great success. Obviously, it's the place to be as far as numbers. Overall size is pretty good. I mean, we don't tend to get the giants. I mean, we have incredible size fish, but like the world records or even some state records and some podok little places are bigger. And I think about like some stuff with if you remember Dave Sanda from Fisherman.
Yeah, I know him.
He was the first one that kind of showed me about this frog deal. And I know me and you have talked about this before. And, for a guy that lives in Ohio and we're fishing, emerald shiners and this and that, like when you start hearing about a frog deal, like I mean, Dave is obviously one of the most soft-spoken, trustworthy guys. And so if anybody else would have told me that, I probably would have been like, you're full of shit. But he's like, oh, no, we got this frog pattern. And maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. And I know you said it isn't as good as it once was, but
it's purely related to how many leopard frogs are left in where you are. And in areas that support a lot, what does it take to support leopard frogs, right? And so first you got to have that. And what happens in the fall, there's a migration where the frogs all hop down to areas that are ancestral frog hangouts in the winter, and they bury themselves in the mud. And I don't know if they call it a estivation or hibernation. It's not real hibernation. It's like estivation. And the walleyes intercept them there. The most interesting thing I've seen with that, I was fishing at the mouth of the Ural River, and I'm watching these beluga sturgeon that are 400 pounds, their tail coming up, and they're rolling around. I went in, and they were sucking frogs out of the mud in the spring in water that was in the that high 40-degree range. So all the creatures that have access to frogs, where there's frogs, any predator's going to go after them. Muskies eat them. Walleyes eat them. Everybody eats them. They meet them. It's just like anything else. There's some other interesting phenomena. There's the coolest migration that I know of that adds up to fish is the coot, C-O-O-T, coot, duck migration.
Yeah.
These big western Minnesota lakes that have had muskies planted in them that have got these big 52, 54-inch fish, a lot of fish in that low 50-inch range, mid 50-inch range. They focus on coots. The last time I was over there, we had a half a dozen fish. We were focusing, instead of on areas where wind would blow in and bait fish would gather, we were focusing on areas just the opposite of that, where the coots are. And every muskie that we caught was pooping out massive amounts of coot feathers. Isn't that funny?
So what do you think a guy like me, or another 100,000 guys that are fishing on the Great Lakes, specifically Lake Erie, like what are we doing wrong to not catch those big fish? Like I know a guy who scuba dives.
You're not doing wrong. I don't think it's a wrong thing. I mean, what you got to do, you're guiding somebody wants to get bit. And typically in any fishery, if you could just park and have this huge view and just look, what you'd see is a whole pile of fish of the youngest year class, and then a little smaller pile of them of the next and the next and the next. And in a few places they might be mixed, in other places they're not really mixed. Right? Okay. And there's certain forage sizes that are universal, that like a walleye is a kind of a unique guy because he can go from eating a hexagenia or a leech to eating his own young, depending on availability. And they do that, as you probably know. Sometimes you'll have a bad year class, and it's because the walleyes ate their babies because there wasn't any hex in the basin right after they at the right period, right?
Yeah.
The very big walleyes that I have seen focus on forage that is larger than what you probably would expect. And also, they are in a smaller number just because they are old, it's an older year class, and they need to get pretty old to get real big. And in most places where there's good walleye fishing, there's a lot of walleye pressure, and people take them home, unzip them, and eat them. And so you wind up with a food pyramid that's pretty flat in most cases. Or not a food pyramid, a year class pyramid gets flattened out because of angling pressure. And so, go in places where you fishing with forage larger than you would expect. And what that does is help keep the rats off. And you will catch bigger walleyes, and you have to fish in areas where that forage exists. And that depends on cover, and depends on, it's like anything. You get down to, where do I catch one? Well, show me your body of water. You've got to look at what the environmental options are.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like in Ohio, I know that this is not probably the first time anybody's publicly said this, because don't really want it around, but they've shocked up a couple giant walleyes here. Like,
no
giant.
Question, they have to be there. There's two ways to get there. The way I described, and then you can also have freakazoids, fish that have got some sort of they don't reproduce properly, and they don't have to go through that stress, and they just get to be a freak. Triploid salmon may be an example of that. And so you've got either a fish that's a genetic freak. I can remember we had a muskie in the Mississippi that was 47 inches long, 44 pounds, and was 11 years old. That's a freak. So sometimes you have a freak walleye. But I think in most systems, just because of the way people fish, you're not going to be targeting the largest of the walleyes. My guess is in those waters where you have muskie fishermen and walleye fishermen, that in the fall, the muskie guys on muskie baits probably catch more big walleyes than the walleye fishermen do. Certainly average bigger.
Yeah, I think, my take on it is, we're not fishing in the same places. To your point of, like, if you want to catch fish, most guys aren't willing to go a day or 2 or 3 without getting a bite when they could catch 30 or 40 if they did something different.
Absolutely right. Totally right. And you can't blame them. It depends on what your objective is.
Like on Lake Michigan, I can remember a guy 20 years ago that was scuba diving and had some just crazy images of these walleyes, who knows how big they were, that were below a water intake crib. And of course, I want to go there. And he's like, dude, the current, you couldn't put a lure there if I was radioing you, telling how to get it. Those walleyes were just taking this easy food that was sweeping through. The current was crazy. Yeah. You'd hang up, I don't care, jig, rig, or whatever. You'd hang up whatever it is in 3 seconds and then break it off.
That's a perfect example. Perfect.
And, I just wonder, like, in our neck of the woods, because a lot of the people that listen to this are Great Lakes guys. And, some of the stuff is, these fish used to be, I think, using shallow water a lot more than they seem to do now.
I think you're right about that.
The other thing is, like, our state record currently was caught by a guy perch fishing, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of what you're talking about, using tiny little, perch rigs and the bottom in 60 or 70 feet of water. Most guys are not going to get a walleye lure on the bottom in 60, 70 feet of water and present it probably slow enough for one of these that wasn't super aggressive. And I think that's why you see so many of these records. I mean, that are caught by, like you said, somebody muskie fishing, somebody catfishing. A lot of it's cat fishermen seem to catch big walleyes, or at least
Absolutely,
records, maybe not numbers.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I know you're a thinker on this, and I'm wondering how much you're going to let us know what we need to do different on big walleyes, because they act so much differently. You can't look at them like you would, like you said, a 6-pounder under walleye. They're a different animal.
What I would say, first of all, define the most likely forage that they're going to target a large fish. And as I said, up in the latitudes where I am right here, it's usually a species of sucker. In some of the lakes, they could be Cisco's and whitefish if they're the right year class. Where you are, there has to be some shad sizes, year class shad sizes, that would be, or I'm thinking out loud. But you want to find the forage, right? And oftentimes the problem is the forage that's the best bait is the hardest to keep alive. And the reason for that is it's the most nervous and it reacts the best. That's why it's the best. And what I found, if I can tell you one thing about presenting, okay, first of all, 3 good live ones are better than 10 mediocre ones. Hot, strong, really good bait when it comes to triggering a fish that is hard to catch. And the other is, look at the way that guys rig up for sailfish and marlin. What you do, you take a little piece of, take your whatever standard hook that you're using, you take a piece of dental floss and you make a loop. And then you take that loop and loop it around the hook. And then you take a little teeny weeny little needle and you run it through the nostrils of your bait. And then you put that loop through the nostrils, and then you put the hook through the part of the loop, you pull through the nostril, give it a spin, put it through again. And so you don't have any hook in your live bait. All you have is a little piece of floss that's got the live bait, or the hook, rigged to its nose. And what that does, anytime you put a hook in a bait, the weight of it will tip him this way a little bit, and he has to fight it to stay upright, and he gets tired. The way that I'm talking about here, allows the live bait to stay way alive, way better. And when a fish comes up and looks at it, it's much more likely to get bit. I've done it with sailfish where you go from 2 or 3 bites a day to maybe 15 bites a day. Yeah, side by side fishing, 2 baits, 1 hook one way, one another. It's just astonishing. Also done it with walleyes and with other species of fish that I know right where they're at, and I just can't get the damn things to bite. And that's a good one.
Are there any other major movements that you think, let's forget the Great Lakes or whatever, but that you've seen in your travels, whether it was Greer's Ferry, 40 years ago or whatever, where, some of the movements on these walleyes that are similar that maybe are overlooked by somebody, I think most guys just don't look in the right place for walleyes because they don't do what you think they're going to do.
Right, and they shut down. Walleyes can really shut down. They turn on an awful lot, like, the way saltwater fish can turn off and on with tides. Walleyes are so light sensitive. Everybody knows that, but they can shut down. And when they turn on, they turn on. Being confident in where you are and having really good bait and being there at the right time. You want to be a night stalker, unfortunately.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. There was a lot of stuff. We're going to have to do this again if you'll allow us, because there's so many different ways we could go with, the crazy brain that is Larry Dahlberg, right?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I spent a lot of time on the water, and I'm happy to talk fishing. Nobody else gets up this early anyway. It's just getting to be transition time right now. It's interesting to watch the water temperatures move and how the fish relate to it. I've got smallmouth this year that are 70 miles from where they were last year. date to date in the migration on movement. Really interesting.
It is. This has been interesting. I hope we can do it again. I hope you'll have us.
Yeah, just give me a call. You got my number. Now we've got this stupid internet thing figured out, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's always the thing. Me and you can find a fish in a rock pile in the middle of nowhere, but yet sometimes the technology world isn't as easy to us. But
It doesn't.
I want to thank you again for tuning in, and all of you guys that listen to the Bigwater podcast. Make sure you check us out at bigwaterfishing.com or Bigwater on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I'm sure I forgot some stuff in there. But producer dude will put it below so we can all see it. So thanks again, Larry, for your time, and we got to do this again for sure.
Well, my pleasure. You stay safe.
Hey, thanks, Larry, so much.
All right. Bye-bye.